So let's take a look at some Astra Militarum light armour. What can the Hippogriff armoured fighting vehicle do on the tabletop? Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, where today we're talking Astra Militarum, and in this one we're taking a focused look at the Hippogriff armoured fighting vehicle, talking briefly about its lore and model, and then going over its datasheet, what it does on the tabletop, damage output of its weapons, and how I'd be tempted to use it in game. The Hippogriff AFV is a recent addition to the Astra Militarum motor pool, essentially a heavily armoured car with a big gun on top, and performs mobile fire support for the guard, essentially functioning as a fast attack mini tank, and is most commonly deployed to help provide fire support to recon units where heavy armour isn't able to move up alongside. The vehicle is far lighter and smaller than the majority of guard tanks out there, though it does mean that it's more manoeuvrable. And according to Games Workshop, any Hippogriffs that do manage to achieve some unlikely armoured victories have their stories passed around the regiments of the guard. There's certainly something all very human and heroic about holding off some vastly superior enemy forces with an armoured car with a big gun. For the miniature itself, it was pretty well received, reminiscent of various six-wheeled light armoured firepower from the 20th century, maybe around the World War II era to slightly later on. There's a few patterns of vehicle which look near enough the same, and it's basically a translation of real-world armour into 40k, something the Astra Militarum have tended to be at least fairly well known for. A more grounded military faction to fight alongside all the power-armoured superhumans and face down some alien horrors with nothing but determination and tech that's far lower than they have. The model's quite a small one, pretty pint-sized compared with the tanks that it'll be fighting alongside. It's got 4 different turret weapon options with a battle cannon, melter cannon, Gatling gun and las cannon, shooting alongside a coaxial, melter gun or heavy stubber. Broadly speaking, it was pretty well received as models go. It is maybe a bit small and cute looking. It's hardly going to be the most intimidating vehicle in the Imperial Guard motor pool, but out of the new Guard releases it does seem to be the one that most people want to get their hands on. When I asked you guys in polls, it looks like it beat out Commissar Yarrick or any of the other recent Guard releases for people wanting to pick at least one of these up. These will be going up for pre-order in the Guard Big Box fairly shortly. If you did want to pick them up, or its individual kit further down the line, check out the channel's affiliate discount links in the video description. There are a bunch of stores around the world that sell Games Workshop miniatures for less than Games Workshop does, usually somewhere between a 10 and 20% saving depending on where you are. A big thank you to anyone using those, as they do help to support Auspex Tactics if you order something in through them. Let's get into the rules for the model though, and here's the datasheet for the Hippogriff armoured fighting vehicle. As a bit of lighter guard armour, you can field 1 or 2 of them per unit, so it means that if you did really want to go heavy on this, you could have 6 on the table with the current rule of 3 if desires, though for my initial impressions I suspect that you're more going to want to field this in units of 1 for a utility style role. For the basics of it, of course it has the vehicle keyword. As per the Astra Militarum, as you'd guess, it does have the squadron keyword and doesn't have regiment. That means if you want to get orders for it, it is going to take up a valuable tank order, and the unit's not going to be super efficient in terms of converting that to value. I guess potentially more so if you did field 2 of them, but I suspect similar to say units of 2 sentinels or armoured sentinels, you're probably not going to see that as much. Squadron also has plenty of interactions with the other things. It's good for the Hammer of the Emperor detachment and can give you lethal hits against tough stuff in combined arms. As well as that, it's got the smoke keyword, so if it desperately needs to try and cling to life on a mid-board objective, it can try to. Again, won't be quite as big a deal as using it on a Russ or a Dawn or something though. If it does die, it's got the chance to explode for Deadly Demise 1, so not really too dangerous to things nearby if it does so, and in close combat it has a few strength 5 hits. It might be able to roadkill a light infantry or 2, but not as much roadkill power as Russes or Dawns. It's not going to be as strong for tank shock either, just getting around 2 or 3 wounds. I was wondering if this thing might have the scout keyword given its appearance and general vibe of it, but that seems not to be the case. Rather than going scout, it just seems like it moves really fast, and as its special rule represent its manoeuvrability when it's fighting enemy armour. For the model stat line, it's maybe a tiny bit lighter than I might have guessed, though not too much. As expected, it does have a decent move characteristic, a 12-inch move base. I would have been kind of surprised if it had had any less than that, to be honest. That should mean it's quite good at peeking round terrain and getting lines of sight when needed to. In reality, if you want to shoot with it, it's going to be 12 plus d6 inches, as all of its weapons have the assault keyword, so you can advance and shoot them. Most of the time it's not going to be too bothered about charging, unless it just wants to nuisance charge something to tie them up. And potentially that means that you could slingshot this thing really quite a long way. If you can spare a tank order, then you get plus 3-inch movement with move, move, move. And with that and the assault keyword, you could have it moving anywhere between 16 to 21 inches in a single turn. That being said, just because you can doesn't necessarily mean that you'd want to just throw it at the enemy and have them kill it easily turn 1 though. Otherwise, for its defensive stats, it's toughness 8 with 7 wounds and a 3+ save, so it kind of depends on what you compare it to for its defensive profile. It's pretty well similar to a Scout Sentinel, just one more wound than them, but not as tanky as Armoured Sentinels given that they get the 2+ save. Whether or not that winds up being a good defensive profile or not will depend on its points cost. I suspect that it would have to be somewhere in the region of the Sentinels to be worth it though. Because they're super cheap, they're quite tanky for the cost. If this was more, then it'll be less so. Otherwise, it's got a standard guard leadership 7 and OC 2. It's not going to be providing so much weight to objectives. Before we move on, I'll just give a quick shout out to today's video sponsor, Inlighter Creative, and they're a wargame supplies company that wanted to share their battle mats and terrain sets with you. For their battle mats, they're standard playing surfaces for Warhammer 40k, 44 by 60 inches, which will be the right size for 11th edition, and they can come in a bunch of different colours and styles. There's an Iron Underhive one, which is quite cool and gritty looking, an Adamant Bastion that has a half city, half desert effects, and a few more generic sort of scrubland wilderness style ones. Plenty of them have grid overlays to help you set up terrain, and some have the current 10th edition deployment zones marked out on them. So far the 11th edition ones that we've seen have mirrored those, though we don't know full info yet. Either way, their designs are quite fun, and they do have some other size for kill team size games. Beyond that, they also have a few offerings of different style ruined terrain sets. These ones made of MDF that comes pre-painted, so you can literally just slot it together and be ready to go. I've got the Ashfall Citadel one and would happily recommend that. They make some quite cool moody ruins and feels like reasonable overall quality for a cheapish price point. They've got 2 other ones as well, including a Foundry one and a Cathedral style one. Again, bear in mind Games Workshop have some different terrain layouts coming for 11th, though they did say that casual games can use the terrain sets that they like. Not every game is played on tournament terrain. In any case, check them out, links down in the video description, and a big thank you to them for sponsoring this one. Next up though, let's get on to the weapons and damage output for the Hippogriff. For the secondary weapons, it is as expected, a basic heavy stubber versus melter gun choice. They do both get the assault keyword as mentioned, so like the main gun you'll be able to fire them after advancing. As these profiles go, they're pretty well balanced in current Warhammer 40k, either up to 6 shots at strength 4 and damage 1, with a better effective range if you need to shoot something far away, or the melter gun with a single punchy shot that might be able to fry an elite infantry or something. You have choices like this on the Rogel Dawn battle tank, and they're considered quite well balanced. If you're planning on using this to sort of stand off and plink shots from a long way away, I guess the choice is the stubber. Up close, I'd probably be more tempted by the melter gun of the two. It could synergize with the melter cannon quite well if you're running with that. Though even if you're rushing up close, the stubber isn't a horrible choice if you want to mash up some lighter infantry that are fighting over objectives. For the bigger, more impactful weapon though, you have the choice of those 4 different primary guns, and as I suspected, they're pretty well in a similar kind of weight class to the current Taurox Prime's weapons, so not as big hitting as the things that you'd find on a Lehman Russ battle tank for example, and the light battle cannon style profile is really quite similar indeed, with a Vigilator cannon at D6 shots at strength 8, AP 1 and damage 2. Otherwise, for choices beyond that, the Gatling cannon spams out a bunch of strength 5, AP 0 and damage 1 shots. There's 12 shots there. And again, that's going to be the best against light infantry, but it feels like the Astra Militarum really don't tend to struggle for volume firepower like this. Lots of vehicles covered in stubbers and lots of las guns on the go. Then the las cannon is listed as a heavy las cannon, so implying like it's the one for the field ordnance battery. But for whatever reason, it doesn't seem to have the same heavy las cannon profile. That one's got a strength 14, so it's just that bit punchier against toughness 12 armor. Whereas this one's just a very standard las cannon profile at strength 12 with the assault keyword like the rest gets. A single big hitting shot isn't the worst in the world though, and this one's the best damage output against toughness 10 or toughness 11 armor. Then finally you have the melter cannon, and this one's basically a single multi-melter profile, 2 shots to strength 9, AP 4 and damage D6, with the melter 2 special rule. It's closer range than the rest, though I guess this one has the movement to get it into range of where it needs to be. To compare those, here's a rough average damage table, firing against a whole range of common targets. The damage output is listed in expected amount of wounds on average if you fire it turn on turn. The firepower is done all just within 18 inches, and for this one I've assumed that you don't have any orders on the vehicle and the opponent's unit isn't in cover. If you assume cover, then the Vigilator cannon might be a bit worse compared with the rest, given it's only AP 1. Cover's changing to a -1 to hit in 11th edition anyway, and when that happens it'll just affect all of these equally. For the damage output, as you'd expect, the Chiron Gatling cannon is the best versus 1 wound infantry, the Vigilator the second choice there, and isn't nothing into the other infantry targets, but not the best. The heavy in inverted commas las cannon is the best against the Gladiator target, and is alright against the Land Raider and Terminators. The melter cannon feels like one of the best general purpose ones for me. Even if you assume that it's outside of melter range, it's still the best profile against the Land Raider target, and it's good against the Intercessor, Terminator and Gladiator, more or less the same as the las cannon against the Gladiator medium armor tank. And then for the Vigilator battle cannon, out of cover with the +1 to save as it is currently, that's best against the Intercessor targets and the Terminators just about, though if they do have +1 to their saving throws, that's a completely different story. At first impressions, my favourite of these is the melter cannon. It cares less about cover in 10th edition with its good AP. The 18-inch range shouldn't be too much of a problem given that you can rush this thing in very, very close, and against the Terminator targets and the vehicles its damage output gets significantly better if you can get it within 9 inches due to going to d6 plus 2. I would still bear in mind though that against any target this thing isn't really going to be standout damage output. The melter cannon might be one of the best choices, but it has the profile of basically a standard multi-melter, so even if you pair that with a top-mounted melter gun, even if you pair it with a melter gun on top, it's still only going to be hitting with all the force of 1.5 Rust sponsons, never mind the whole mounted las cannon, hunter-killer missile or main gun. Then finally though, we have the special rule for the vehicle. I did suspect that given the overall appearance of its profile, the special rule might be a make or break thing that does some heavy lifting for it. At least this one is interesting. Its special rule is called Convoy Escort Vehicle, and in your shooting phase, after this unit has shot, it can make a normal move of up to d6 inches, and if it does, it's not able to charge this turn. Basically this gives you move, shoot, move, something that's kind of unusual for the guard to have access to. They usually tend to be more sort of direct, shoot you in the face and take the damage that comes as a sort of army. I think it makes enough sense for this thing though, if its whole thing is being manoeuvrable, maybe hitting enemy tanks and then trying to hide from the repercussions, because its defense profile certainly can't take it very well. I guess the idea could be that you could advance this up into the midboard, plink some shots around the corner at an enemy unit, and then use that d6 inches to hopefully hide from the firepower that's sure to be coming back at it in return, and maybe balance the fact that it's got pretty low damage output, with hopefully being able to strike something and then save itself from being hit back. It's definitely an interesting special rule, and you could use it for the longer ranged options like the las cannon or the battle cannon maybe, if you just fractionally nose round a corner to get into a firing lane, shoot some shots downrange, and then use this to hide again. Even a low roll like a 1 or 2 might be enough to keep you safe and break that all-important line of sight. Even if it did get to perfectly fire all game with that though, it still might not work out as being super efficient versus just getting a great big heavily armoured Rust tank or 2 that's likely to have far better damage output per point. Maybe there's some scope for this as a utility kind of role though. If you're moving it up to skirmish in the midboard, it's going to be slightly more annoying to deal with than certain other things out there. And if you did decide to plink shots for a few turns and then zoom up to do objective stuff and get lines of sight late game, it does have the movement to do so. If you just literally want to cover ground with this, with move, 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 you could be moving 15-inch base, advance an extra d6 inches, and then use this rule to go an extra d6 inches when it gets to your shooting phase as well. So that's anywhere between a 22-inch average move or a 27-inch maximum move. If you need to get it in a place to do an objective or contest something, then it's likely to have the movement to do so. Maybe the question is whether or not this is going to be enough to sell it versus, say, other light armor things that you could have there. Scout Sentinels being a particularly popular one, given their buffing rule that can help out other guard firepower. As really quite a light vehicle, even if you did decide to run it in a squadron of 2, it doesn't look like it's going to be a great efficient target for tank orders out there. I guess it might be the sort of unit that you have in your army, and then if you lose other tanks, you might be able to dedicate tank orders its way, or if it just makes sense on this turn, such as giving it extra movement on the turn in which it zooms off. But otherwise it just seems likely that you're going to get more value throwing these squadron orders towards Rusters and Dawns, more so than super light support vehicles firing off with 3 standard melter gun shots. It also doesn't seem like one that you normally want to use stratagems on. Once more, you're going to get more value elsewhere, though I guess situationally, if it was all important it just survives this turn to do an objective, maybe using smoke or something could be alright. For boosting damage, as with other guard fire supports, you could theoretically get some value from Hellhounds, Lehman Russ Exterminators, or rerolls from a Sentinel. Again, more opportunistic given that they want to be spotting things for your main damage dealers. And then for detachments, it's going to get value from things that can give it some passive buffs maybe. Combined Arms Regiment is pretty helpful, as it gives you lethal hits with those melter guns, which does make them significantly more of a threat against monsters and vehicles. In theory land, if you get one of these with a melter cannon and melter gun within 6 inches, it's got a take aim order on the go. Your theoretical average damage output on a 3+ save vehicle is about 5 or 6 wounds, obviously dead swingy depending on whether or not you actually get that melter wound through or not, but given the likely cost of this thing is going to be pretty cheap, looks like that could really swing the difference between it being an alright trading piece or not so much. Otherwise, Grizzle Company has a few more orders to go around, might be helpful if this thing is going to be a low priority unit that might not get one otherwise. The reroll ones to hit never hurt either. The Hammer of the Emperor also seems nice for this. That plugs in an automatic 6 advance, which seems about as relevant for this as just about any other unit in the guard. It means that you'd be moving 18 inches and still being able to fire, and then also moving d6 inches after that. Otherwise, maybe it could be fun for the recon element guard. It feels on theme for that. Some people like to take a lone scout sentinel in recon to mess with enemies scoring objectives for taking down tough stuff. Maybe in theory you could replace one of those with that and have it plinking shots all game from safety with move, shoot, move. Still, that might not be the best idea if Scout Sentinels are wanting to return to reserves later in the game. Overall, for first impressions, The datasheet is interesting, but I can't help but think it's going to be a pretty niche choice for the guard. Obviously it will depend on final points cost, but even if it's dead low, it seems like it's still going to be a bit more of a supporting role vehicle. Between move shoot move, having really low damage output, and the fast movement making it good for utility, I'd guess you want to field it in units of 1 rather than 2. Have to say it's fairly expendable units that is just going to cause the opponent more annoyance to deal with than they might expect. I think for first impressions, things like Melter Gun plus Melter Cannon, and have it annoying enemies in the mid-board with some close-range firepower, and its move shoot move seems like a reasonable choice to me. Perhaps you could think about going Visualizer Cannon and the Stubber to plink from safe shots while at longer range, and then moving off quickly in the late game. Points-wise, given it's more or less got the defense of a Sentinel, not really much more firepower, and no reroll ones buffing rule, I'd hope that it'd be in a similar sort of points bracket to that, maybe around the sort of 55 to 70 points mark. I must admit it's slightly low damage threat for a big chunky model footprint. Does remind me a little bit of, say, the problems that the Orc Buggies have at the moment. They're not necessarily going to be able to move around the table all that easily, having to keep away from enemy units. And if you are taking up valuable board space with this, and then it's probably just going to be doing some chip damage at the enemy, you might potentially be roadblocking some more important units. Let me know what you make of the Hippogriff though. Do you think its rules are interesting for the guard or not? Either way, I'll certainly be interested enough to add maybe a couple of them to my guard army when I get a chance. I do think they're quite fun little models to go alongside the armoured column. Thanks to Lighter Creative for sponsoring this one. You can check out their Wargame supplies link down in the video description. They've got a bunch of battle map playing surfaces for 40k, plus some ruined terrain sets made of MDF that comes pre-painted in some moody colour schemes. I'll leave that there for now though. Feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics if you'd like to see more like this. I'll certainly keep the regular 40k videos coming, with new ones out just about every day. I'll be back to talk about Commissar Graves and the new Centaur vehicle in the next couple of videos. If you've been enjoying the videos on the channel and you'd like to help support, Auspex Tactics does have a Patreon page as well, and you can find that linked in the video description. Channel patrons get a fair few advantages, seeing certain videos early, regular votes to see what sort of things happen next on the channel, and automatic entry into the regular prize giveaways with the chance to win some big model kits each month. If any of that sounds good to you, or you'd just like to help support, the link's in the video description below. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.